Hi Ashish, good evening.
Good evening, Shravani.
Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you joining us for today's session on Indian Pharma, a great access story. I would like to begin by introducing our moderator for today, Dr. Shohini Ghosh. Dr. Ghosh is a global executive MBA alumna and topper of the batch of 2022 and has had a long stint in pharma working at the R&D Center at Torrent Pharmaceuticals Limited. Sorry, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Okay, sorry. Before joining Ahmedabad University, where she is currently Director, Administration and Chief of Staff, Office of the Vice Chancellor. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us as the moderator for today. Over to you.
Thank you, Mehak, and I'm very excited to be part of this conversation. Today, we will explore one of India's most impactful success stories. The way our pharmaceutical industry has transformed healthcare success across the world. Over the past decades, India has earned the reputation of being the pharmacy of the world, building strength on scale, affordability, and scientific depth. It has been instrumental in making essential treatments from generics to biosimilars to affordable vaccines, as we all saw during the COVID phase, accessible to millions. So our session on pharma, on Indian pharma today, a great success story, will take us through how Indian pharma has shaped global health outcomes, the milestones that have made this possible, and what lies ahead in continuing this journey of innovation and accessibility. So I would like all of you to please join me in welcoming Ashish Kumar, Mr. Ashish Kumar. He's a Senior Vice President and Cluster Head, Zydus Group, who has joined us today to speak on Indian Pharma, a great access story. Thank you, Ashish, for giving us your valuable time today for this session, and it's a pleasure to have you here. Um, to give a brief introduction about Ashish, he is the Senior Vice President and Cluster Head at Zydus Group, one of India's leading pharmaceutical companies, an alumnus of IIM Calcutta and the GEMBA program at Ahmedabad University. Ashish has successfully led commercial operations and market expansion across diverse geographies. His deep industry insight and leadership experience make him uniquely placed to guide us in understanding the opportunities and the challenges that shape the future of the pharmaceutical sector in India. So thank you once again, Ashish, and over to you.
Thanks, Shavini, and thanks to each one of you who gave me this opportunity. But at the outset, my first thanks to Ahmedabad University for getting this webinar done and giving me the opportunity. I would also like to thank all the professors from the GEMBA group, where I got the opportunity to have learning from them. I would also like to thank everybody who is joining for the today's webinar. And before I set the ball rolling and share the perspectives and few opinions I have about this topic, I would also like to put a disclaimer here that whatever I am going to share in next, say, 30-35 minutes comes from the learning I have from working with some of the leading Indian pharma companies, the learning I have by working alongside some of the great colleagues I had, and also from the experience and the observation I had in these 2 decades of pharma experience. So take it as an opinion rather than a fact. Combine that with your observations and then probably take it as an final fact. The other thing which I wanted to put forth is that the reason for speaking on this topic and deciding to probably have a discussion on this topic was there is no denying that Indian pharma today needs to gear up, speed up, probably emphasize more on the innovation. But at the same time, there is also no denying that Indian pharma, what it has done is unparalleled. The impact it has created in last 4 to 5 decades is huge, and at times probably we talk less about that. So I thought I'll take this opportunity to talk about it. We need to be proud of Indian pharma. We are all part of this industry. So I thought I'll probably, from my experience, I would share some of the big impacts Indian pharma has created, which has actually changed the lives of many patients. So that's the perspective, and with that, I would like to get going. And I would probably request Mehak to share the screen and the PPT.
Yeah. Is it visible?
Not yet. Maybe the first slide, Mehak. Yeah. So thanks, Mehak. And that's the topic for today, Indian Pharma, the great success story. But before, as I said, I get into my observations and the learnings. I thought I'll do a call a friend, or phone a friend, and probably see what the biggest friends of ours these days have to say on this topic. And we all know who are our biggest friend these days. The biggest friend for all of us these days are AI engines. So I thought I would also ask them that what they probably have to say about this topic. So I asked a question to the biggest friend, which is ChatGPT. Next slide, Meg. And Meg, if you can move to next slide. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this was the question I asked ChatGPT. How will the world be without Indian pharma? And ChatGPT came up and said, "Do you want an image or you want probably a right away answer?" I said, "You can give me an image. You can probably give me a frank answer." So the image which ChatGPT created was really touching, and next slide probably showcases that. Mike, if you can move to the next slide. This is what ChatGPT on my question shared. ChatGPT said the world would without the Indian pharma would be sicker, poorer, and unequal. And it had the reasons for that. Sicker because the life saving medicines would become out of reach for millions. Poorer because healthcare costs would skyrocket, bankrupting families and straining public health budgets because health budgets are managed because Indian pharma is able to give very cost effective quality generics to the world. It would be unequal because developing countries would lose access to affordable treatments, reversing decades of progress in the infectious disease and the other diseases. And it probably summed it up by saying that Indian generics are not just drug, they are lifeline that keep healthcare systems standing across the globe. And very, very relevant message which the chat GPT probably shared with us. It also came up with a statement which probably the next slide would showcase. Yeah, Meg, we can move to the next slide. This is what it also said. It said India is often called the pharmacy of the world for good reason. We all know it's called the pharmacy of the world, but it said it's for a good reason because pharmaceutical industry is the largest supplier of generic globally. So Indian pharma accounts for almost 20% of the global supply, and when it comes to vaccine, it is almost like 60%. And if that capacity vanishes, that means the if Indian pharma goes away from the radar, the ripple effects would be massive. So this is our biggest friend ChatGPT shared on the topic. So I also went to Gemini. I thought it's not good to just have one friend. It's always good to have multiple friends. So I went to Gemini and asked the same question. And this is what Gemini had to say on the topic. It didn't give me a message, it didn't give me any other facts. It just shared this simple image. And this image is enough to probably get the fact which we are trying to draw from today's conversation that pharmacies across the world, whether it is Europe, India, or US, right, would probably be devoid of many, many critical drugs which are made accessible by the Indian pharma. So the picture speaks louder than the words, and this is what Gemini had to share with us. I wanted to call last friend, and so I went to probably one more last friend to ask the same question, and this is what I asked the Perplexity AI, and this is what it shared with me. It said that the impact of Indian pharma is different on the developing and underdeveloped nations and probably different on the developed nations. And Perplexity said, I would want to probably share both the impact separately. I said, go ahead. And this is what came out from the message Perplexity shared with us. On the developing and underdeveloped nation, I think all of us know today that various public health initiatives like PEPFAR and Global Fund depend upon the Indian pharma. PEPFAR was established in 2003 mainly for combating AIDS across the world. This was established by US President and then a lot of support came around. And then Global Fund was established around 2002 by the envoy of United Nations, and it was mainly for AIDS, TB, and malaria. And the plan was to ensure that the underdeveloped nations, where probably at that point of time AIDS was becoming quite rampant, including the other diseases like TB and malaria, there should be a funding which probably should be able to help give the access of these critical drugs to millions of patients in these nations. But what happened is, I would like to just quote here, probably elaborating on what Perplexity actually shared with us. At that point of time, an cost of 1 year of AIDS drug in 2000 was $10,000. So while the intention was to support millions of patients, but the cost was too high. So if $10,000 was to be spent to support one patient in Africa, we all can understand how many patients would have been helped. But it was Indian Pharma which brought down the pricing to $1 a day. So the cost of 365 days to manage AIDS for ARV medicine came down to almost like $365. So one patient, $365. So with that price, it was actually PEPFAR and Global Fund, they could actually help millions and millions of patients. Similarly, if we talk about Gavi Alliance, which is an alliance for affordable vaccines set up around year 2000, and this was actually from the thought of Melinda Foundations, and then a lot of organizations came together to ensure that the children in the underdeveloped nations are vaccinated. Until today, I think 1 billion children have been vaccinated through these funds, and India probably contributes 60% of that. So while on one side we have innovation, but then if you look at the impact Indian Pharma has created through these global funds would have not been able to impact a larger pool if Indian Pharma was not there. And Indian Pharma today has almost contributed 60-70% of the spending of these funds, impacting millions and millions of life. But if we look at the developed nations, what has been the impact of Indian Pharma, the impact has been different. I think there was a time in the late 90s or early 2000 when the word notion was that the biosimilars cannot be made. That is, if the biologics are there, then it would be very difficult to copy those biologics because you develop them from the live organism, and then there are probably millions of amino acid sequence which come together to make that biologic. So they said that the generic of biologics, which later was differentiated from being named as generic but biosimilars. So at that point of time, the notion was it cannot be made. But it was again Indian Pharma which probably developed the early biosimilars, taught the word that biosimilars can be made even when the regulatory was not very stringent on that. There was no regulatory pathway. Even that at that point of time, India developed biosimilars and learned from that. And what it has done, it has brought down the healthcare cost of the word, especially in the developed nations, significantly. Today, through biosimilars, the healthcare budgets have gone down, and with the same spending, so many patients are able to take the life-saving drugs. We also saw what India Pharma did in the COVID time, from supplying the hydroxychloroquine to probably developing the vaccines for the world. I think everything world saw what Indian Pharma can do. So it had both impact on the underdeveloped nations as well as the developed nations. So with that, I think I would move away from friends and probably get into sharing some of my learnings and perspective as well. And for that, this is the first quote I would want to probably share with all of you, that innovation means nothing unless it reaches every life, because we're not talking about a car or probably a bag here, right? Where probably a human being, if doesn't have access to the Teslas or Mercedes or probably the Gucci bags of the world, they probably would still survive. But think of a drug which has been developed for saving lives, and there is a patient who probably needs that drug, and if the patient gets the access to that drug, the patient would survive. But the patient cannot access to that. The patient doesn't have access to the Medicare like US, and the patient probably would be devoid of that drug only because of the access. So I think in pharma, the access means a lot more. It's not a choice. It has to be available to everybody who needs it. So that's where I think Indian pharma has played a significant role, that it has ensured that the innovation in the pharma, which makes a critical difference to the lives of patients, became accessible to a larger group of patients. So that's a thought we all need to carry, that and need to be very proud of what Indian pharma has actually done. Yeah, next slide. Yeah. So I also wanted to share the evolution of Indian pharma as a global player. Because if we look at the era before 1970, most of the critical drugs were not available because we had a different patent regime. But it was in actually 1970 when the process patent came in, and then was actually the some of the big Indian pharma companies started to come up. They started to probably use the process patent and started to develop the generic drugs in India. And I think 1980, 1990s was the time when India got access to a lot of drugs. The healthcare improved, the life expectancy improved because we had most of the drugs available. But with this learning, what happened was that not just in India, Indian pharma also learned to make the quality generics, and their drugs started to move to the global horizon as well, where global partnership mergers happened, and India actually started to be looked upon as one of the countries which can actually develop quality generics. And from India to the world happened in 1990s to 2000. But India also, through this path, learned that while we improve access, we need to create value as well. Because just by making the cheaper drugs, we would not be able to sustain for a long period of time, because the innovation was improving across the world. And that was when, in the 2000 to 2010, India started to develop the biosimilars. And this was a time where the word took the recognition of India even to a larger extent. And then, as we all know, COVID came, and then Indian pharma actually became the fulcrum of saving many, many lives. So that's been the transition Indian pharma has faced, and moved from the access to the value chain over the years. Next slide. So I think a very, very important slide to mention here, because we talk about innovation so much. Indian pharma today is valued around 65 billion, which is like one tenth of what US pharma is, which is like almost like 600 billion plus. Uh, US pharma is expected to go past 1 trillion in next 5 to 7 years, while Indian pharma might cross 300 billion in next 10 years. So there's a quite a difference of the size of the market. And even if you look at the proportion of GDP, US pharma is 630 billion out of 30 trillions GDP, while Indian pharma is a small share of 65 billion out of say 4 trillion of Indian economy. So there's quite a difference both on the size and proportion of the economy. But then we cannot undermine what Indian pharma has done on the global health impetus, because while US pharma has been able to give innovative drugs to the world, those drugs have not been accessible to a large group. It is Indian pharma, while the value created has been less, but the impact actually on the affordability, global health programs has been huge. So I think the word has been balanced in healthcare because both Indian pharma and US pharma exist. While US pharma has been playing its role in innovating drug, or the European pharma, and Indian pharma has been taking the opportunity so far to make those drugs accessible. So I think if we have to look at a balance, it was actually both of these words, global north or global south, which was required to probably do what it has done to the healthcare of the world. Without Indian pharma, all those innovative medicine would not have been accessible to a larger pool. Next slide. And this is very fascinating to probably look at. This is actually a data of US, which shares the manufacturing footprint of pharmaceutical finished dosage forms, that what is the share in US of different manufacturing units. And if you see, especially the solid oral finished dosage form, 60%, 60% of that comes from India. Even if you look at injectable, 15% of the US finished dosage form injectable comes from India. Clearly speaks that it is not the cheap generics, it's the quality generics which we develop. and we have been supplying to one of the most developed nations in the world. So it gives a lot of confidence that we have the ecosystem to develop the best drugs, not just the cheap drug. Next slide. And this is something which speaks about the prowess which Indian Pharma has, and we all should be aware about it. Then, when it's about the volume, what Indian Pharma probably supplies to the world, it's about almost like 20% of the global volume India supplies, and it stands in the top three nations in terms of the volume. What's our share on the global vaccine? As I shared earlier, it's almost like 60%. So think the word on the vaccine front without Indian Pharma, probably it would cease to exist. Most of the patients would not be able to get vaccine. And if we look at the US FDA approved manufacturing sites, outside US, India is the number one country to have the highest number of US FDA approved manufacturing sites, which is like 600 plus. And WHO GMP certified plants almost like 1400. We have 3000 pharma companies, 10,500 manufacturing units, unlike anybody else. Look at like 23,000 manufacturing units across the world, 10,000 stands in India. So that's the ecosystem we have been able to create. And it's massive, it's huge. It's just that we have been able to supply the quality generic so far, and we need to transition to the next level. But our ecosystem actually is ready to do whatever we want to in the future. Next slide. So while we created a lot of buzz on the generic revolution across the world from the era of maybe 70s to 2000, but as I shared that around 2000, the notion of biologics cannot be made as biosimilars started to develop. That while India has been able to develop quality generics, but the future molecules, especially in the areas like oncology, are going to be complex, and those complex molecules cannot be they cannot be a copies for that. So that was the notion. So after the generic revolution, there was a challenge for a country like India, especially the Indian pharma industry, that what do we do on the biologic space? How do we create higher value by creating the accessible version of these biologics? But India took that challenge. India challenged that notion, and Indian Pharma was the first pharma probably country to probably develop the first monoclonal antibody biosimilar. And at that point of time, there was no proper guideline as well that how those biosimilars can be made. And I would like to probably share two specific examples here where I have also been part of and witnessing the impact these biosimilars actually created, not just in India, but across the world. Rituximab is one of the biosimilar which is used for lymphoma, a disease which we, on a broader term, name as blood cancer. And if you go 20 years back, you say anybody blood cancer, and they would say there is no survival. But this is one of those diseases where if you are able to give the patient access to rituximab along with the chemotherapy, 60% of the patients will actually get into cure. But the scenario in India till 2007 was that out of say 50,000 eligible patients, only 10%, that is, only 5,000 patients had the access to that drug because the drug was the most of the patients in our country pay out of the pocket and they didn't have the access to this drug. But then, as I said, India Pharma took the challenge. They spent significant amount of research here, and they could develop the world's first biosimilar of rituximab in 2007. And since then, this disease uh, is no more like a fatal thing for the patients in India. Most of the patients today have access to rituximab. Even Ayushman actually gives the access of rituximab because it is quite cost effective. And almost all patients of lymphoma have access to rituximab. So that's the power of biosimilar. Similar thing we have seen in trastuzumab, a drug which is used for a type of breast cancer, HER2 positive breast cancer. Until 2015, trastuzumab was available in India, but access was only to 5 to 7% of the eligible population. Again, a drug where if you give access of trastuzumab to this set of breast cancer patients, almost 70% patients will not have disease for almost like 10 years. So 10 years of disease-free survival, we can say almost 70% patients were getting into remission or cure, what we call. But unfortunately, most patients didn't have access. So you had a drug, but you can't give the access. And then probably Indian Pharma again raised the bar, developed the biosimilar of trastuzumab. And since then, most of the patients today, when I speak in 2025, this set of breast cancer patients, all of them have access to this drug. So that's what Indian Pharma has not done. That it's not just limited itself to the generics, push the bar of innovations and also developed biosimilars. Actually, the word biosimilar was also coined when some of the biologics generic, when the name was not there, biosimilar was developed in India, and then we started to name them as biosimilar. So Indian Pharma has actually shown the word that what it can do even when it has to go to the next level. So from the generic revolution to the biosimilar revolution, and probably I'll share what was the next revolution which Indian Pharma got in. Yeah, we'll move to the next slide. So while we move to the biosimilar revolution, we showcase to the world that biosimilars can be made, and even the top pharma companies in the US and Europe, which till that time felt that biosimilars cannot be made, and they were part of making regulatory at certain level how the biosimilar should be made if they had to be made. They also realized that yes, finally it can be done, and they also got into developing biosimilars. But then at that point of time, the innovation was actually moving to the next level in the world. From the generics to the biologics, the world, especially in the areas like oncology, were developing something called as ADC, antibody drug conjugate, where you combine the biologics with the drug through a linker, and it's a very, very complex molecule. And again, the notion came in that okay, we were able to develop biosimilars, but now uh, whether it would be possible to develop the biosimilars of ADC, where you have a biologic complex, you have a linker, you have a drug, all three coming together. Again, the notion spread that for ADCs, the biosimilars could not be developed. But then, as India had done in the past, they did the generic revolution, they did the biosimilar revolution. India again raised the bar and developed the world's first ADC biosimilar. Until that time, there was no ADC biosimilar in the world. It happened in the year 22, and it was again for a very, very critical area, HER2 positive breast cancer, where these women, if they had access to TDM1, they would have additional years of lives in their disease management. But then the drug was available in India, the innovator drug, for almost 6 years, and only 1600 odd patients, or maybe less than 2000 patients, had access to this drug. So that means hardly any patient in the country was actually having access because of the cost. But then Indian Pharma raised the bar, developed the first ADC biosimilar of TDM1, and since then story is different. Most of the HER2 positive MBC patients who need this drug are able to access this. So that means we have added thousands and thousands of years of lives to the patients who needed that drug but were unable to do that. And we also showcase again to the world that complexity is not something which is a barrier for Indian Pharma. If there is something to be done, Indian Pharma is ready for that. That showed the capability, strength, and the resilience of Indian Pharma in developing the complex drugs as well. So, from too complex to biosimilar, Indian Pharma has shown that if you are able to raise the value, the millions would access. And that's what Indian Pharma means, that the innovation should not be not denied, especially in the drug industry, to most of the patients. Next slide. So this is what I have been talking about, the generics era to the biosimilars and the complex generic era, developing almost like ADC biosimilars, having the capability to develop the complex injectables, having the liposomal formulations to be developed out of India. But now I think what India is looking forward to, especially the Indian pharma is looking forward to, is embracing innovation, because we have up the value chain every 10 years or 15 years. but we also now understand that we have the ecosystem, we have the manufacturing facilities, we have the talent in the country. We can take the next step. And Indian economy now probably amongst the top three in the world. We know that we can now embrace innovation. So, and that is what probably would happen in the next 20 years, where we will see the R&D spent by the Indian pharma company is going to increase. It would be in the range of 8 to 10% or even more by some of the top companies. And we will see many, many new chemical entities coming out of it. And in last 3 to 5 years, Indian pharma has already shown that. Indian pharma has contributed new chemical entities and new biological entities, which you will see going to the global space. We have actually developed the indigenous CAR-T within India by the collaboration of Tata and IIT Bombay, which was actually noticed by everybody in the world, because if we were talking about ADC CAR-T is even next level of innovation. And we were always looking to the West nations that the CAR-T, which probably costs maybe 4 to 5 crores for a patient in US, how the Indian patients are going to access that. And India showcased that. India again raise the bar, and then we have our own indigenous CAR-T today, giving access to a lot more patients. And many more CAR-Ts by the Indian companies are, or probably the academy are in line, which would probably see the light of the day soon. So we are embracing innovation, and next 20 years are going to be very, very exciting for the Indian pharma. Next slide. Yeah. So this is something which might be the plausible paths of the Indian pharma company, because while we have reached here where we can develop any biosimilar, develop any complex generics, we have started embracing innovation. But when we probably need to take the next step, these are the cases which I feel might be the reality in next 10 to 15 years. Maybe there's a base case where we keep on spending around 9 to 10% of our R&D. We Ayushman Bharat mission probably scales up to the next level. The profit link insurance keep increasing, and we are around say $200 billion market, and probably have 20% of the revenue from the innovative drug, and we might reach around $200 billion. But I think we will do better than that, and we would somewhere be in the accelerated or the breakthrough kind of a phase where many top Indian pharma companies would have many new chemical entities or new biological entities being contributed from India to the US and EU. We will have Indian global brands in the next 10, 15 years, because we are looking at that era coming soon, and we might somewhere land around 300 to $500 billion in the next 10, 15 years. So I feel Indian pharma is going to open up many, many jobs for many of the pharma professionals, and programs like GEMBA are going to probably help those professionals groom in. And we will have to be getting ready for that era as well, because it's not what we know today would be sufficient for all those what Indian pharma company has to do in the future. Because when you're embracing innovation, creating the value, increasing the value, probably as a professional also, we will have to be mindful of the fact that we also need to improve to embrace those innovation as well. Coming to the end of my presentation, uh, probably Mehak, I'll request you to go to the next slide. This is something which you saw as the first slide, that when I asked ChatGPT that how the world would be without Indian pharma in 2025, this is what it showed: sicker, poorer, unequal. But then I asked ChatGPT again that if Indian pharma embraces innovation, is able to contribute to new chemical entities, new biological entities, get into a space of say $500 billion in next 10, 15 years, how do you feel the world would be? And this is what our dear friend ChatGPT shared, that the world powered by Indian pharma would be healthier, prosperous, and equal. Because when Indian pharma would develop the innovation, they would be more accessible. It would probably ensure affordable access to go to advanced treatments. It would ensure that the innovation-led newer drugs goes to a larger set of population and the patients. So that's what our dear friend told. And I also believe, and I'm sure all of us believe, that if Indian pharma grows bigger, all of us probably are going to see much better, healthiest, prosperous, and equal world in the coming years as well. So with that, I'll sum it up here, and probably give the session back to Shohini.
Thank you, Ashish. That was a really quite thought-provoking presentation, and I really found a lot of things that you said very critical and important for, I think, India's pharmaceutical sector as we move ahead. And you're absolutely right. India's story is testament to how access, affordability, and innovation. We do need to do no, we need to do more, but all those how they can change global health outcomes. And you know I think it's so important that we we figure out or we emphasize strategies going forward that further strengthen the innovation and enhance value creation, because that is the way of the future. So which brings me to my first question. uh, about our neighbor. So, China's pharma industry has evolved from, a generics driven base to a state backed innovation led ecosystem. They've leveraged policy support, capital infusion, and global talent repatriation. Now, what insights do you think India can draw from this transition, and how do you think our policy, our financing mechanisms, and other strategies can be shaped differently to build an innovation driven biopharma ecosystem which is suited to India's unique context?
Thanks, Shohini, for asking that question, because this is something which probably we keep debating internally, that while India was ahead on the generics, what so happened that on the innovation, China actually took the lead, and what we need to do to probably ensure that where China is moving, we also reach there pretty fast. But then to understand that, we will also have to be mindful and observant of the fact that what China did, which probably we missed and now we are doing it, that led to this. So I think the first thing which happened in China was probably in the years of 2010 to 2015 was policy change. China made it very clear that we would incentivize innovation and we would spend on innovation. When I said China, it was the government initiatives on the policy change. They invested on bioclusters heavily. There were 5 to 6 bioclusters, especially in Shanghai and Shenzhen, which was set up, and the pharma companies were given huge fundings to develop their pharma operations there. And they also made it clear that if there is an innovation which is coming out from China, what would happen is, if suppose there is a drug from a developed nation which gives you say PFS or OS, what we say in oncology, of say 12 months, and you are able to develop a drug which gives you probably a similar OS or PFS, you would be there in the reimbursement scheme of China on the day one, and you would be getting a better realization from that. That means you're getting support in innovation, you are also getting the support from the government to set up the infrastructure. But if you are able to innovate, then you also have an ecosystem where you will be able to realize the revenue as well. So I think that is somewhere we need to probably set the direction in India. If we feel that pharma in isolation would be able to innovate, uh, it will, but not at the scale of China. I think pharma, the government, and the policies, everything has to come together to probably reach that level. Otherwise, we'll set bend. But I think the good thing is things have started moving in India. We see a lot of policy changing happening in India in the last probably few years, where the government is getting into supporting the Indian pharma on the innovation. I think the other area which we'll have to be very mindful is, and which is a learning from the developed nations, which even China is doing, is the kind of innovation which is coming from academia, right? We know that 47% drugs comes from academia in US. Even the basic drug paclitaxel was never developed by the top oncology company in US. It came from one of the universities, and then it went to the other university. They developed it to the next level, and then the pharma took it up. I think that is another area where we have so many universities, so many academia in India. I think the collaboration has to happen. And the last part, which probably we need to learn from China, is the investment, which is coming in from various sources to the pharma organizations, which might help spur the and surge the innovations in the country. So I think we are in the right direction. just that we need to take the speed, call for action, and do those things in a faster pace. Otherwise, I think we are a bit slow to what China has achieved, but we really need to do the catching up. But there are enough there are enough learning in the room to probably know about it, and Indian pharma knows about it. Just that we need to take those steps collaboratively with the government and the policymakers and reach that level.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And all the 3 points that you mentioned, I think are very critical, thought-provoking, and definitely give us, there are things for us to, act upon, I guess, in the Indian context, of course. Um, my second question is regarding, some of the current happenings around the world as we speak. There are some uncertainties, and there's some of it is regarding regulatory changes in regulations, shifting of tariff structures, and of course the advent of AI in drug discovery. And these are often seen as headwinds for Indian pharma. And others. So, what do you think? Could these challenges act as a sort of a turning point, pushing the Indian pharmaceutical industry for sure to accelerate its shift from, the scale-driven generics to a more innovation-led model? Do you think this would also have an impact? These can be factors that can be positively sort of structured into getting towards that model.
Absolutely, absolutely, Shweta. I don't think uh, these are times to be worried about. I think these are times to grab the opportunity, because the biggest thing or the biggest advantage today which Indian pharma has is that it has the ecosystem, right? And if the ecosystem is in place, what needs to change is the culture towards the innovation, because we always build the culture of bringing the accessible drugs. And because we got the opportunity and penetration across the globe, we created this 10,000 manufacturing site, 3,000 pharma company, highest number of FDA approved manufacturing sites. So and then probably a largest pool of pharma professionals across the world. So with that ecosystem in place and these things happening in the global space, I think it's a great time for us to probably speed up what we intended to do in next 15, 20 years. Maybe that's an inflection point or probably a push which we are getting from across the globe, that what we intended to do in 15, 20 years has to happen in 3, 4 years. Otherwise, we'll probably have a lag. One lag we already have with our close neighbor, and we don't want to have a second lag again and then probably fall behind. So we have our advantages. It's just that we need to have a mind shift. We need to have a big push. And as I said in your last question, that it wouldn't happen in isolation. I think the government also have to be supportive. The policy, regulations, everything has to be set up very fast. And with that, I think we can make that push and use this opportunity that in next 5 to 7 years, the new chemical entities, the new biological entities start coming out from the Indian pharma companies, and they become part of the regimens in the major treatment landscape across the world. So I think, yes, this is an opportunity rather than a probably threat at this point of time.
Absolutely. And I think the world belongs to complex molecules, right? I mean, like you
Absolutely.
said, of course, NCs, but also ADCs, and there could be even, innovations that we are yet to, we may not have thought of. So I think, looking at time, I'd like to open up the forum and get some of the audience questions. Mehak, would you like to walk?
Yeah. Um, if there are any questions from the audience, you can feel free to post in the chat, or you could just raise your hand and ask.
Yes, I have a question. Shall I go ahead?
Sure,
Yeah,
please go.
please, please, please.
Yeah, thank you for wonderful presentation, Ashish. My question is to you. Do you think Indian companies can balance cost competitiveness with maintaining the highest global benchmark of quality?
Thanks, Varun, for asking that. I think we've already done that. We have proven that beyond doubt. Because if you remember, I shared one of the slides where I mentioned that if you look at the finished dosage formulation in US and look at the manufacturing footprint, 60% of those supplies are coming from India on the oral dosage. So that means almost every second tablet which is sold in US is from India, manufactured in India. And if the most developed nation is depending upon India so much, so that means our manufacturing sites have the capability to not just develop the accessible drug, but the quality drug. That's why they are accepted there. So we have the historical footprints out there, but I would not deny that there are challenges because the margins, because of the various pressures across the globe, are getting compromised. So we will have to keep improving, keep innovating, even on the manufacturing practices. We have been the experts of process engineering. It's not that what we have is enough even for the future as well. We will have to continue our innovations on the manufacturing area, and we'll have to keep improving on what we have achieved so far. If we do that, I think we are on right path. We have proven enough to the world what we can do, and we'll keep continuing that. But obviously, the laurels are not enough. We'll have to go to the next level.
Okay. Anyone from the audience?
Yeah, I do have a question.
Yes, please.
Yeah, good afternoon. So basically, my question is like, how does the GEMBA program basically equips pharma professionals to transition from operational roles to value creating leadership positions?
Thank you. Thank you for asking that. Uh, I think that's the most important questions I would want to answer here because, see, most of the pharma professionals would come from the scientific background, right? Most of them would have either biotech, B farm, so those kind of backgrounds. You enter the pharma, what are you trying to do? You're trying to make uh, innovative drugs, accessible drug, and you're trying to probably also ensure that those drugs, when they become accessible, they are probably priced at a particular point, right? So whether it's about pricing, whether it's about revenue, those things are not taught in the graduations or post graduations with the scientific background. GEMBA would give you an opportunity to ensure that you also have the financial acumen, because without the financial acumen, you might make the drugs, but making it accessible at the right pricing, at the right place, those things would be difficult for pharma professionals. So GEMBA is giving those opportunity to learn the financial things. GEMBA also develops you for a global place and space to be excelling in not just the Indian space but the global space as well. I probably myself have learned so much through the case studies which were shared, which helped me how these mergers and acquisitions happen, how the collaborations in the pharma happen, because you cannot do everything in one pharma company, right? You might be a great company on the biologics, you might be great company on new chemical entities, on the smaller drugs, or you might be a great API player. But if you have to be an end-to-end solution provider, you will have to collaborate. And the pharma background doesn't give you an opportunity to know how those partnerships, those collaborations, mergers and acquisitions happen. And Jemba gave you those learnings that if you have to collaborate, how do you do that? How those mergers and acquisitions happen? How do you find partners? So that's where Jemba prepares you for a better professional. The other thing is, see, I'm part of Zydus today. We are almost like 25,000 plus employees across the world. All of us are trying to do one common thing: make drugs, make it accessible, trying to build innovations, take the innovative drug to the world. So when we are trying to do it together, we just don't need the pharma professionals. We also need leaders who can influence, motivate the larger groups. Like we have manufacturing, we have HR, we have finance, we have sales and marketing. So we have different functions, and all of them come together to probably create one common impact on the world. But all of them with such large groups need good leaders. And for leadership, you need different qualities, right? These are not your technical knowledge, which you would have learned in your schools. So that also means that You need leadership qualities, you need leadership learnings. How do you drive or probably thrive in difficult environment? So GEMBA also prepares you for those leadership roles as well. So whether it's about the financial acumen, whether it's about the leadership qualities, whether it's about collaborations, mergers, acquisitions, or probably creating value, those learnings probably GEMBA at least has given me, and I'm sure that GEMBA would be helpful for everybody who gets into this program to have a holistic view about the pharma company. We cannot have a very smaller view and with that we probably look at creating impact. If we know the industry on a holistic front, we'd be able to do better, and that's where GEMBA helps you a lot and ensures that it develops you for all the future roles which you can have in a pharma company.
Ashish, there's a question for you in the chat box. I'll just read it out. You mentioned about being a need to shift minds and ideology to be able to accelerate growth of pharma companies. So my question is, what are some of the ways with which the industry is taking on these large complex goals?
So maybe you can repeat the last line.
Yeah, so we have Nandini asking that my question is, what are some of the ways with which the industry is taking on these large complex goals?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. See, if we look at how the Indian pharma has developed, right, there was first scrutiny, right? It was there always on the Indian pharma, and the scrutiny came from the developed nations. But it helped as actually a push. We knew that the FDA inspectors or the EMA inspectors would always be there watching us, inspecting us, and that helped us move the quality bar to the next level. Today, we have prepared ourselves to a level where most of the top Indian pharma companies are passing most of the FDA inspections. As I said, we have most of the manufacturing sites outside US which are FDA approved. So that scrutiny helped. But scrutiny helped to a level. If we look at Japan today, think about an automobile industry, we know that the culture there in Japan today is about quality. It's about a culture of innovation, right? And if you're getting something from Japan, especially in terms of say automobile or any of the areas like electronics, you know that you will get in mind, okay, that's a quality product I'm getting, right? And if you probably today get something from China, though China is improving its image, you might feel pata nahi kaisa hoga, I don't know how it is, right? So the first thing to achieve those bigger complex goals would be to have this shift of scrutiny culture to a culture of quality, that everybody in pharma, whether it's on the job floor to probably the head of the function, everybody speaks one language and speaks a language of having quality culture, right? Having a culture of creating innovation. See, innovation is not just about drug, right? If you have a culture of quality and culture of innovation from the bottom to the top and in all functions, it will help you achieve complex goals. I'll give you an example. When you're giving a drug to a patient, say you have developed a drug for a geriatric population, and the population for which your drug is, maybe most of them are 70 years plus, and you have probably a oral tablet, and they find it very difficult to probably consume those drugs. And you have innovation as part of your culture. I am sure your manufacturing team would try to probably make a formulation which becomes easier for probably that geriatric population to develop. So it's not that you always have to innovate great drugs to probably be relevant or creating values, but everything, even a good packaging, a good formulation, a different kind of delivery system, all of these are innovations. And that would happen if your every department is embracing innovation. They're trying to improve by understanding what the patient needs, because end of the day the pharma is only relevant if the patients are there, and what patients need also have to be understood by the Indian pharma. Are we actually making, we are just not copying what the somebody has developed, or we are trying to improve and improve the patient experience as well? If we have that culture in mind, I think all those complex goals would be achieved.
I think there's one question, Ashish, last that we can take. It's by Suyash. He's asking what skills the next generation of farmer leaders need to build to thrive in an AI-enabled pharma industry?
I think to thrive in AI-enabled industry, first of all, we'll have to be adaptive of the AI models, right? If we really want to thrive in those models where a lot of our work are going to happen through the AI engines, we probably have to ensure that we actually create the next level of innovation. And how do we do that is an important question here, because we are seeing that especially in the R&D, what AI models have done is fascinating. The work which probably was done probably in 4 to 5 years to find a single chemical moiety or a molecule now probably
Sorry.
is maybe there's is
Not
getting done
intentional.
in a few months, right? Just by changing a small chain of a structure, you're able to find something new, and then you probably eventually start with the early studies there. So the speed of action is becoming faster with the AI model. So I think the leaders of today, first of all, have to embrace this, accept this. They should not feel that AI is probably a threat to us. I think we'll have to all feel that AI is a companion. Our speed, our outcomes are going to become faster, right? So if the outcomes are going to become faster, the 15 years of drug development is going to happen in 4 to 5 years, then we also know that the world would see large amount of drugs getting probably innovated by the pharma company. So if our systems are developed in a way that we will develop one drug in 15 years and the things are happening in 5 years, we need to change, right? Our speed has to change. Our probably disciplines have to change. Our processes have to change. So I think we'll have, if we start first of all embracing and accepting that the call of action is speed today and not considering AI as threat, but probably adding our value to the AI models and ensuring that the outcomes are beneficial for a larger group, then I think we are on the right space. And the last thing which I would want to say is we will all have to improve. We were groomed or probably educated in a different world, and all of us are facing a different kind of a horizon in the coming times. If we have to be relevant and all of us want to be relevant, we'll all have to keep learning and keep changing.
Absolutely. I think we have to adapt and adopt these changes and make sure that they actually enhance value. And there's a lot of scope for that, especially through, shortening the timelines. And as you said, speed is of criticality. So if there are no more questions and looking at time, this brings us to the close of today's webinar. Thank you, Ashish, for a very insightful conversation on the Indian pharmaceutical landscape in the context of the current scenario that we're in, and we're also shedding light on how it is shifting from, how we're shifting from being a pharmacy of the world to and moving more towards a larger innovation-led ecosystem. Of course, there's a lot to be done, as you said. And of course, at the same time, with continued focus on affordability and accessibility. And something you said at the beginning, I think it's very important is innovation means nothing unless it reaches every life, right? So this carries additional significance in the context of pharma and in life-saving drugs. So the future lies in not only in how India can balance it, it lies how India can balance innovation and value creation, and at the same time maintain what we have been able to do with in terms of affordability, right, and accessibility. So with that, it brings us to the end of today's session. On behalf of Ahmedabad University and everyone present, I extend our heartfelt thanks to you once again, Ashish, for generously sharing your time and valuable perspectives with us. We deeply appreciate your presence and contribution. And I'd also like to thank all the attendees for being part of this session. If you have any more questions about our session today, please call us or reach out to us, and you can connect to our admissions team and schedule a one-on-one call. And thanks, Ashish, again, and wishing everyone a very wonderful day ahead. Have a good
Thank
weekend.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Shravani, for the
Thank you.
opportunity.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.